Appreciations to Sacred Earth, appreciations to viewers who take the time to contemplate with me some of the issues, the problems. So this video is dedicated to what on the surface looks like something we call a weather crisis. Point one, that's level depth of analysis one, which is the symptoms of change. These are the weather events that are very more visible, they're acute: hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, etc. I'm just like anybody interested and concerned and studying these impacts of when we talk about weather and when we talk about how to change our ways of living to adapt to the weather changes, how to change infrastructures, all the money and budgeting and attention that goes to weather change. And obviously, insurance companies are very interested in all of that because there's a lot of money to be made and lost. Level two, much more down the rabbit hole we're going to go in the analysis to climate crisis. These are the large patterns of change, the more invisible patterns, the slow changing buildup of CO2, for example, and other greenhouse gases. The human brain, according to many people for well over 50 years, have suggested that it evolved with being able to detect very immediate changes in certain emergencies, weather crises, predators, disease, but the slow building problems of a changing interior environment or exterior environment, and things like that are so invisible, like CO2, we can't actually see it, we can only measure it with new scientific evidence and the measurement tools for that evidence. The human brain and our nervous system, our evolutionary history seems not very well suited to detecting and or responding to slow changes. That's the second level of the problem. Third level of further down the rabbit hole of weather, climate, we move to pollution crisis. The pollution is a word that's almost virtually disappeared. When I was a young person in my teens, pollution was a very important word. I think that's very unfortunate. It's been lost from the vocabulary for the most part. In a sense, whether it's weather crises or climate, global warming, etc., ultimately we're talking about a pollution crisis and all the extra effects that toxification of systems and what's that other bigger word, dysregulation of cycles, when we are not regulating and moving with the natural cycles and economic cycles with its hyper progress initiative at seemingly any cost. Grow, bigger is better. That is the pollution crisis of level 3. Deeper down the rabbit hole, we move into number 4, ecological crisis, loss of biodiversity, loss of connectivity, when more and more human species are dislocated from their natural lands, from their wild lands, from their wild and primal ways of being and understanding their sacredness, of which the earth is one ecological system, not one economic system, as in a capitalist or even a socialist or any other kind of political ideological formation of the earth. No, it is a biological, natural, ecological system, first and foremost, foundational. So this leads to a domestication when we lose that ecological sensibility and sensitivity and intelligence. And domestication leads to the 5th level, which is ultimately we become an invasive species crisis. Oh, you thought weeds in the garden were bad, or dandelions or thistles or other weeds, invasive species, starlings, European house sparrows invading North America, whatever the case may be, invader bees from Africa. We have many ideas of labeling invasive species, but we often forget to label, especially when we talk about weather and climate crisis, that we actually are an invasive species of the grandest scale. And let's admit it and not pretend that that is not what's actually going on. And the reason is because we're dominator and arrogant. We spoil our own nest. And we have become a monoculture. And we keep moving everything toward a monoculture. The agricultural field of one species is just one example of that. Trying to make the whole world one color, one thought, one religion, one anything is a move to a monoculture. Deadly from the point of view of ecological law. And level 6, if we were to keep going on our analysis, moving again from weather down through climate crisis to ecological and so on, we have to move to the psychological crisis we're in. And I'm glad to hear a few politicians like Marianne Williamson running for U.S. Democratic candidate of presidency in 2020. She actually is saying, as a few others are, and have others before, I've always said it, we are in a psychological crisis, basically, where we're coping instead of healing as a species. We've learned to reconstruct and go against our grain to, when we're hurt, to heal. And this leads to basically self-abusive behavior. Think of it, global weather, climate crisis, ecological crises, etc., spoiling your own nest, etc. It's a self-abusive behavior that affects our offspring and undermines their future possibilities. We have to go deeper to level 7 as well. Reality crisis. This is the sociopathic economic system, as Marianne Williamson, for example, has said, and a few others. I've seen educators, including myself, call our education system psychotic. And this is a worldview problem of, we're probably in a worldview of a dead end on average in the Western dominator worldview that has to change, being challenged now by the indigenous worldview and alternative worldviews that guide us. Deeply, deeply troubling, deeply, deeply psychotic and sociopathic in consequences. Some have called this a philosophical level of the problem, and I agree. It's a part of how we actually understand our relationship to reality and what reality actually is, and we are losing touch with certain realities that will inevitably, probably wipe us out sooner or later, and I'm talking sooner by within the near 10 to 20 years of potential extinction on a massive scale. I'm not alone on that. Then obviously all of the loss of big reality or whole reality or holistic view of reality, which has continually been shaved away and cracked and torn apart by the other 6 levels adding to it. But this is the level of which we also have to reclaim and rehabilitate, which is to get beyond reductionistic thinking to, let's just call it holistic or integral thinking. And the last level, level 8, of course, there's no beginning and no end to what I just showed you with these cards, and I'm only summarizing them to keep this video very brief, is to remind us of the fear crisis at the bottom. And this is my specialty, and it's the concern of the accumulation, the ongoing accumulative effects and affects of collective and individual trauma. That is basically hurting processes that are not being healed, creating a cycle of violence that continues until we do that healing work at the deepest level, which means that we have to take fear absolutely as seriously as any other phenomenon, including sex, including freedom. We have to look at our fearuality. then our sexuality, and then our spirituality. So that's the very simple model I use, as it brings just to a close. And if you want me to do more videos and talks on this, we can keep looking at emergence, the birth of the sacred, where we actually live on this planet in an entirely different way and worldview. Thanks for listening.